Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to tackle something a little different today, something that's been around for ages, but, still affects us all. The devil.
Mm,
And you might be thinking, wait, isn't that like religious stuff?
yeah.
Yeah. And it is, but what we're really digging into is the psychology of it. What does this archetype mean for you in your everyday life?
Right.
Our source material today is a really cool YouTube video from After School.
Okay.
They explore how this idea has evolved, its deeper meaning, and how it shows up in our world.
Yeah, it's amazing how this seemingly ancient concept can still be so relevant to us today.
I know, right? So to kick things off, let's talk about this idea of order arising from chaos. The video mentions it's a common theme in ancient myths.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Babylonian story where Marduk, this god of order, battles Tiamat, who represents chaos.
Right.
And from that crazy fight, the world is born.
Yeah, it's not just a Babylonian thing though. I mean, the Egyptians had their own version with the serpent Apophis trying to swallow the sun god Ra each night.
Oh, wow. A constant back and forth between light and darkness.
So it's not just about good versus evil, but this idea that you need some chaos, some disruption to create something new.
Exactly. And that resonates with us today, doesn't it? Think about your own life. Maybe you've gone through like a job loss or a big breakup. It's chaotic, it's painful.
Yeah.
But those are often the times where we grow the most, where we discover new paths and possibilities.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like without that shakeup, we might just stay stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got this chaos, this potential for change, but then the video talks about an ongoing struggle between good and evil. That pops up in tons of religions and philosophies, right?
Absolutely.
But
Take Zoroastrianism, for example. They have this epic cosmic battle between Ahura Mazda, the god of good, and Angra Mainyu, who represents evil.
okay,
And that idea had a big impact on the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam.
right. And then there's Gnosticism, which is interesting because they see the material world itself as kind of evil, a distraction from the spiritual realm.
It's like they flipped the script.
Right. It's not about saying one belief system is right or wrong, but seeing how these different ideas shape our understanding of morality, our sense of right and wrong, our place in the universe.
So for you listening, where do you see this battle between good and evil playing out in your life? Is it in your personal choices, your relationships, the news you read every day?
It's a big question, but I think being aware of that struggle can help us understand ourselves and the world a little better.
Yeah, it's all about making those connections between these like ancient concepts in our modern lives.
Now, speaking of good and evil, we can't talk about the devil without mentioning Lucifer, right? This angel who rebelled against God, driven by pride and ambition.
Yeah, it's the classic tale of hubris, that Lucifer's ego, his desire for power, ultimately led to his downfall. And it connects to another famous story, Adam and Eve. The serpent tempts them with knowledge, with power, appealing to their sense of pride, and that's what gets them kicked out of paradise.
It's interesting how that theme of pride keeps popping up.
And it's not always a bad thing, right? Like having confidence in yourself is good. But when does it cross the line into arrogance? When does it become that blind ambition that can really mess things up?
That's a key question for all of us to consider. I mean, think back on your own life, those moments where maybe you let pride get the best of you. What happened? What were the consequences? It's not about beating ourselves up, but learning from those experiences.
Yeah, it's like that saying, pride comes before a fall.
Mm-hmm.
We all have those moments, but it's how we handle them that matters.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about chaos and order, good and evil, pride, but the After School video also delves into the psychology of the devil archetype, which is where things get really fascinating.
Exactly. They point out that the devil doesn't show up with horns and a pitchfork. It's much more subtle, working through our own desires and weaknesses.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had these examples of the devil's half-truths, those sneaky little phrases that can lead us astray.
Right.
Like, do what makes you happy, but what about the impact on others? Or everyone else is doing it, as if that makes something right.
Right.
Or even, you are the god of yourself. That ultimate appeal to ego.
It's so easy to fall for those messages because they tap into our deepest desires and they offer seemingly simple solutions to complex problems.
So for you listening, what are some of those lies you tell yourself? What are the temptations you struggle with? Just being aware of them is a huge step.
Awareness is key, yeah. It's the foundation for making conscious and ethical choices.
Now, one of the most mind-blowing ideas from the video is this concept of psychological projection. It's basically when we take our own negative qualities and throw them onto other people.
It's like instead of facing our own flaws, we see them in everyone else. It's classic blame shifting.
And this is where the shadow self comes in,
Yeah.
right? The video talks about that.
This is a term coined by Carl Jung to describe the parts of ourselves that we reject, the traits we deem unacceptable, the dark impulses we try to hide. It's like a hidden side of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge.
So all that stuff gets buried in our unconscious, our shadow.
Exactly. And because we haven't dealt with those aspects of ourselves, they tend to come out in unhealthy ways, often through projection.
So instead of admitting we might be a bit greedy, we accuse someone else of being materialistic. Or if we're secretly insecure, we point out other people's flaws to make ourselves feel better.
The video has this great quote: "When you point a finger at someone, 3 fingers point back to you." It's such a powerful reminder that the things that bother us most in others often reflect something we're struggling with internally.
Whoa, that's deep.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm always judging people for being lazy, maybe I need to look at my own procrastination habits.
It's not always comfortable, but confronting our shadow is crucial for growth.
So for those listening, when have you seen this play out in your own life? What are some of the things you might be projecting onto others? It's a tough question, but it can lead to some real breakthroughs.
It's not about being perfect, but about understanding ourselves more deeply and working towards wholeness.
Okay, so we've been talking about this shadow self, right?
Yeah.
The parts of ourselves we try to hide. It makes me think of those classic 7 deadly sins, lust, greed, gluttony,
Right.
the whole gang. Is there like a connection there?
The video definitely draws a parallel. It suggests that these vices can be seen as like expressions of the devil archetype, those temptations that pull us away from our, better selves.
So it's not just about avoiding like sin in a religious sense, but seeing how these behaviors can actually hold us back in life.
Exactly. It's about understanding the consequences.
Okay.
Like unchecked greed can lead to exploitation and inequality. Uncontrolled anger can wreck relationships. And as we've seen, pride can have its own, set of pitfalls.
So for our listener, which of these sins do you find yourself wrestling with the most? And what happens when you give in to those urges? It's something to think about because knowing our weaknesses is the first step to overcoming them.
Absolutely. Now, the video is pretty upfront about this. Facing the devil archetype, both within ourselves and in the world, can be tough. It's not always easy to admit our own shadow side or to see how we might be contributing to, negativity.
Right. It's much easier to point fingers. Blame someone else. Avoid taking responsibility.
But here's the thing. Real growth comes from facing that darkness, from confronting our own demons. The video stresses self-awareness, critical thinking, and choosing good over evil, even when it's hard.
It's like actively choosing the path of light, even when you're surrounded by shadows.
Exactly. And they use this powerful image to illustrate it.
Okay.
Hell is described as that state of mind which has abandoned itself so completely to a given sin that it cannot act independently of that sin.
Whoa, that's intense.
Yeah.
It's like when we become so consumed by something, whether it's anger or greed, addiction, we lose our free will. We become like slaves to that vice.
That's the danger of letting those impulses rule us.
Right.
But the video offers hope, too. It reminds us that by recognizing our shadow, by actively striving for good, we can break free from that grip.
So it's about making conscious choices, even when faced with temptation, and building those qualities that bring out our best selves.
That's the heart of the journey. It's not about being perfect,
No,
but about embracing our human complexity and trying to become better versions of ourselves.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways our listener can walk away with?
Well, first, remember that the devil archetype, while often seen as an external force, really works through us. It's our thoughts, desires, and choices that give it power. And second, facing our shadow, those parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden, is crucial for growth and breaking free from negative patterns. And finally, choosing virtue, whether that's love, compassion, understanding even when it's difficult, is the ultimate rebellion against darkness.
Powerful stuff. This conversation has really made me think about the choices I make every day and how they contribute to the world around me.
Yeah, it's not about being preachy, but about recognizing the power we each have to make a difference.
Before we go, I have one final question for our listener. If the devil archetype is all about division and deception, what are some ways we can cultivate unity and truth in our own lives and communities?
That's the challenge, isn't it? But it's a challenge worth embracing because, in the end, It's our individual and collective choices that shape the world.
Yeah, it's like we have this power, this choice to either feed the darkness or nurture the light. It's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is, and it's not about like achieving some impossible state of perfection. It's about recognizing our own capacity for both good and evil, and then actively choosing the path that aligns with our values.
And that path might look different for everyone.
Right.
I mean, what works for me might not work for you. But the important thing is to be conscious of our choices and their impact.
Exactly. There's no like one-size-fits-all solution. It's about self-awareness, critical thinking, and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
That's what I love about these deep dives. They always give me something new to think about, some new perspective to consider.
Yeah, me too. And it's not just about accumulating knowledge, it's about applying it to our lives, using it to become, better, more conscious human beings.
Well said, and I think that's a great note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today, from ancient myths to modern psychology, and it all comes back to this idea of choice. The choice to face our shadows, to resist temptation, to cultivate unity and truth in a world that often feels divided and chaotic.
It's a journey, not a destination. And it's a journey we all take together.
Beautifully put. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the devil archetype. Hopefully you've walked away with some new insights and a renewed sense of agency. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.